Today, we're going to dig into a single quote, one that's seriously provocative. It seems to turn everything we think we know about family completely on its head. So, we're going to unpack a pretty wild philosophical take that tries to make sense of this really shocking idea. Okay, let's just dive right in. The idea we're wrestling with today comes from the Gospel of Matthew. And it's just a single line, but it's one that has confused and frankly disturbed people for centuries. And there it is. A person's enemies will be those of his own household. Now, what makes this so tough to just brush off is who said it? Jesus. I mean, if some random person said this, you'd probably just think they were ungrateful or maybe a little messed up. But when it comes from a major spiritual figure, it kind of forces you to stop and ask a really difficult question.
Right? I mean, how on earth can this be true? Our families are the people who raise us, who worry about us, who are supposed to have our backs. For most of us, family is what gives our life purpose and meaning. So how could they ever be seen as an enemy? It just feels wrong. It goes against every instinct we have.
So how do we even begin to square this circle? Well, the interpretation we're looking at today offers a really specific answer. And the whole key, apparently, is to understand who this message was actually for in the first place. So here's the first big twist in this interpretation. The argument is that this isn't some universal rule that applies to everybody. No, it's meant to be very specific guidance for people on a spiritual path. Those who are trying to transcend the everyday material world and reach for some higher state of being, whether you call it heaven or nirvana or something else. And this slide really breaks down that core difference. For what the author calls an ordinary person, a teaching like this sounds totally absurd, maybe even offensive. They'd hear it and just laugh it off. But for the sages and saints, the spiritual secrets, they hear it and they don't laugh. They think about it, they look for the deeper meaning, and they try to live by it. It's a message designed for a completely different mindset. Okay, so if this is a message for the few, what is the message? The whole argument really hinges on one powerful, central metaphor that completely reframes our relationships, the idea of debt. The author builds their entire case around this idea, which also comes from the Gospels. The basic premise is you cannot achieve spiritual freedom. You can't get out of there until every single one of your debts is paid off. Not most of them, all of them, down to the very last penny. Now, this is where you have to do a little mental flip, because this interpretation completely redefines debt. We are not talking about money here. In this spiritual way of thinking, debt is every act of love, every bit of care, every obligation you have to your family and friends. These are the emotional, spiritual ties that bind you to this world. I mean, just look at these examples. Your parents' love and nurturing, that's a debt. Your devotion to them as a child, also a debt. Your spouse's love, your brother's support, your best friend helping you move. In this framework, all of these wonderful, positive things are also massive spiritual debts that you've taken on. Okay, so if these debts of love are so huge, so profound, that maybe they're impossible to ever fully repay, what does that mean? What does that mean for the person trying to break free and achieve spiritual transcendence? Well, this is where the argument takes a really sharp and kind of unsettling turn. According to this author, these unrepayable debts are like spiritual anchors. They're so heavy, so powerful, that they literally prevent a soul from rising. They chain you to the earthly realm, forcing you to come back, life after life. And so from this very specific spiritual perspective, your family, the source of the biggest debts of love and care you'll ever have, becomes the #1 stumbling block on your path to heaven. It's a really shocking conclusion, but if you follow the author's logic, it's where you end up. And here's how the author says it actually plays out. You decide you want to meditate for hours a day or devote your life to service, but your family, with the absolute best intentions, pulls you back. They keep you grounded in worldly things like paying the mortgage and going to family dinners. They unintentionally become the enemy of your spiritual goals. So, if this is the problem, this giant spiritual obstacle, then what's the solution? The author lays out a path to what they call transcendence, and, to put it lightly, it is radical. This path is all about letting go in a huge way. First, you have to see all your attachments for what this philosophy says they are, debts. Then, you have to release your own ego, your own opinions. And then comes the really hard part. You release your attachment to everything, your family, your country, even your religion. At the end of the day, the only thing you can really claim as your own are your debts. And there's a huge warning that comes with all this. The author is very clear. Death is not an escape hatch. It doesn't cancel your debts.
If you don't settle your spiritual accounts in this life, they just follow you. You'll simply have to come back and deal with them in the next one.
Which brings us to this final, powerful statement from the author, which really sums up the whole argument. All the things we hold most dear, our partners, our family, our country, from this point of view, these are the very tickets that guarantee our return trip to this world, keeping us locked in the cycle of reincarnation.
And so it all comes down to this one question, which is really the heart of this whole philosophy. If your family, your identity, even your accomplishments aren't really yours, if they're just attachments and debts, then what is? It's a really challenging idea for sure, and it definitely makes you think twice about what it means to be connected to other people.